Hi, welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today is Rachel Barclay. Hi, Rachel.
Good morning, Irina.
Welcome to my channel.
Thank you.
I've been really fascinated with Sashiko's fiber art because it just seems so practical and so cozy. Like it's something where it's not just art, right? It's something that you can wear, you can patch up your old pair of jeans or add a pocket to some, sweater or something or coat, but it also can be a piece of art. So to me, this combination of practicality and art is very appealing. What brought you to Sashiko? How did you discover that?
It's definitely the best of both worlds. I learned Sashiko at a slow fashion retreat run by Sam Hoyt of A Gathering of Stitches. And it was up in Maine, and it was 5 days of just immersing yourself in stitching, natural dyeing, and drafting your own clothes. And as part of that, Jessica Marquez taught Sashiko visible mending, and it just really struck me. I was very, very frustrated because Sashiko's on a grid. Actually, and you do your stitches on a grid, and my grid kept coming off because my hands were sweaty, and then I couldn't see, and so then I cried, and but then something clicked, and just being able to have your hands busy on your clothes to embellish them or mend them, because it's traditionally a Japanese mending practice. It didn't start as decorative. It was just a running stitch to repair clothes. But it's evolved for me as a purposeful, beautiful, kind of meditative, calming practice where you embroider and make your clothes stronger. And it just sent me off on a whole journey where I used to sew my clothes on a sewing machine on my little Bernina, just zip them out. And now I don't really sew clothes. I take what I have and remake it, or remake my husband's clothes, or buy thrifted clothes. So I just don't I just kind of work with what I have now. It really inspired me and took me to my little hippie self, my hippie childhood, where you patched up all your pants and stuff. But it was I'm going to kind of go off. I mean, the mending practice, all cultures have mending practices. I mean, my and embroidery practices, and it just really struck me and kind of connected me to my Jewish past of my grandma and my great aunts, being seamstresses and remaking their clothes.
It's interesting. I remember being a little kid, probably 6 or 7, and my grandmother was teaching me how to mend my socks. And for some reason, I mean, you would think that 6 years old don't have patience for that, but I was in love with the process. She had that little wooden mushroom that she would stick inside of the sock, and I would be sitting there for hours mending it, and somehow making something broken whole again is very healing.
Exactly.
Well, if people don't know anything about Sashiko, right? What would you say the difference between that and embroidery? What people think about as embroidery?
Well, I'm not an I'm a novice still. I've been doing this for 3 some years, but I would say the difference is in embroidery, you have a hoop that holds your tension nice and tight, and you go up and down in your embroidery hoop. You do your stitches on top, you go down. In Sashiko, it's a running stitch that stays on top of your fiber or your textile, and you use your hands together to hold the tension. And it's actually easier on your hands than embroidery and knitting and crochet, because your non-dominant hands feeding the fabric onto the needle and your dominant hands just gently rocking. So you're not like gripping. Like, I don't know. I tried knitting, it hurt my little hands. So that, and Sashiko started as a mending practice. I don't know how Western embroidery started. But you see all the beauty of, let me go over here. Even now, just like the little stitched hankies they're delicate and aren't meant to, be workwear. And Sashiko started out as mending workwear.
Right, and like making it tougher and warmer, actually.
Yes, it's also quilting. Yeah, so you would do, in the olden days, like in the 1600s, you do layers of cotton or hemp or wisteria fiber that was loosely woven, and you'd layer them and then quilt them with the simple Sashiko running stitch.
Well, from what I've heard, like the thread that you use, it's also cotton thread, and it's much thicker than the usual sewing thread.
Yes.
Is it hard to find materials, like the proper materials here in the US?
You're not, yes and no. A lot of times you will find Sashiko supplies with people who have a Needle Arts website or a Sashiko website. I get my supply. There's also some wholesalers that have it, but you can't go to a craft store and find it. And you can't really go to I went to the art store and they're like, oh, that's crafts. We don't carry crafts. They're like all snooty. So, high-end independent fabric stores and quilt shops will have it. And you just search Sashiko. Don't get it from Amazon. Get it from, one of your private, independent, mostly women-owned artists or websites or Etsy shops.
What about the fabric? What do you usually suggest?
So traditionally, Sashiko was done on secondhand cotton that was dyed with indigo. That's why you see the blue with the ivory stitching, which was like unbleached cotton, tightly wound. It's at this point, it's personal preference, but I would say that in the US, you see denim, lightweight denim. People buy linen to stitch on. You can also buy cotton sarashi fabric from Japan, which is a really nice kind of open weave texture for making your tea towels samplers. There's also cotton double gauze is nice. Really, you can stitch on anything. You can stitch on quilting cotton as long as it's not too tight. You can stitch on knit. The knit is harder because it's like a little more squirrely, but you can do it.
Well,
cotton, linen, and denim, I would say.
Right. When you look at the finished product, right, it seems impossible. It seems like there is gazillion stitches going in every direction, but there are actually patterns, right? And there is an approach to that pattern making. So it's not that you take your thread and you just go in every direction. There is like actually sequence of directions for you, right?
Yes.
Was it difficult for you to learn that? Like is it overwhelming to learn for a beginner?
It's actually quite liberating because you don't have to make up the pattern. There's a grid and and Sashiko, because it was originally done on garments, you keep the tension in your garment. So you do all your horizontal stitches first, and there's a grid. You go up the corner, down the corner, up the corner, down the corner. You gather a bunch of stitches on, and then you change. When you do horizontal, you do another stitch pattern to create your pattern. So it's not, of course, when you first start anything, it can be frustrating as the crybaby in the room. But, I have something right here, actually. So you can, with just horizontal stitches and then diagonals, there's a set pattern, and you don't have to count per se. And there's tons of books and resources online. I really like Make and Mend by Jessica Marquez. I like the Ultimate Sashiko Guidebook by Susan Briscoe, who was a Scottish woman that went to teach English in Japan and then went back to learn Sashiko. So she, there's
actually watching her interview. It was like fascinating to hear
yeah,
her story and how she learned. Well, when I was watching her doing it, she could put like basically the entire length of fabric on one needle. Do you feel like this is an acquired skill? This is like, how did you change from like when you started to now, as far as like how many stitches you can put on the needle?
well, you know, first I teach Sashiko, and you know, everyone's very, you know, adults are very scared all the time. So I did like 1 or 2 stitches, and Jessica was very gentle with me. And you just, some people want to just immediately, you know, load up their needles, and some people can do that, but you just want to make sure that you're just like present and in the process. So, you know, I can maybe get, you know, I could, this is 4 inches. I could get 4, you know, I can do a whole row now. I don't always do it though, because I don't want to jam through. I want to like enjoy the process. And it takes, I don't know, everyone's different. It takes a while. And I have people.
Your like initial work, right? Like those first samples. Now,
Yeah.
like, are you horrified at the unevenness of stitches? Like, does it jump at you? Is it like endearing to see it?
It's sweet. It's not, I'm not horrified. It's, you know, it's the process. And when I look at it, oh, can I go run and get my coat? So this is the first thing I stitched, and it's squares and diamonds, which is a very old pattern. And, you know, it looks like a quilt pattern too. So
it's beautiful.
Right. And if you look closely, you can see my stitches are uneven. And here you're supposed to avoid the intersections to make a starburst. But I was just so excited, like finally to be able to stitch after drawing the grid and sweating and not being able to thread my needle. I think it's very sweet. Aw.
Well, okay, like tell me like how that happened, that you went to that first retreat, you learned how to stitch. Like I'm sure you didn't leave it thinking that's it, you're a professional.
Oh,
how did you become a teacher? Like what was that transition like?
Oh, that was very interesting. I was just stitching all the time and stitching at home and like trying to teach myself some of the patterns from a book and drawing in the book, and I just kept stitching and stitching, and it was very natural for me to keep patching my clothes. Like I'd always patched my clothes. And so I patched my clothes, and with my little Sashiko patches, which were not very good, but still very cute. And I didn't have Sashiko thread. I was using pearl cotton number 5 and 8, which is a little thicker and has a little more texture. Sashiko thread's tightly wound and like fairly smooth. And I went to a sewing class, actually, Hexie's. It was hard for me, those little English paper piecing. And the teacher, the woman that owned, the teacher was the owner of the sewing school, and she saw my patches and she asked me, do you want to teach Sashiko? I was like, you know, I don't know. I just learned, you know, how can I teach Sashiko? So she's like, well, it looks good. So I consulted with my mentor, Jessica, and she had some pre-printed samplers so that it would be easy for the students, and you can get them in her shop. And then I taught the sampler class pre-printed several times, and then the pandemic hit, and then nobody did anything. And then I just kept stitching at home, stitch, and then a local craft center asked me to teach. And then then a fabric store asked me to teach. And like, so people just started to ask me to teach. And I was trained as a teacher, actually. And, you know, when I think
I
back,
remember that like first class where you're terrified walking in and thinking like, oh my God, like, what do I know?
as a teacher, if you're a teacher, you prepare like crazy. So I practiced everything. I talked my way through it. I wrote myself a little script. I had my lesson plan. Then, of course, you get 8 people in the room and they're like, blah, 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 wow, then they're just like kids, you know. Of course, I'm always terrified, but I was very prepared. And then things happened that I didn't expect. Like, I didn't expect people to, you know, like I got frustrated, but other people got frustrated in ways that I hadn't. So it's just like when you're a teacher, you just go in and things are going to happen and you don't know, you never know everything. You never know what people's previous hand sewing trauma is. And there's a lot of that, you know, so you just have to tell them your stitches are not going to be straight and you're going to poke yourself. And if you're frustrated, you're learning.
Well, if talking about poking yourself, I watched a Japanese lady showing Sashiko, and she had the thimble that was covering inside of her hand.
Yes.
It was almost like a ring turned around.
Yes.
And then when I watched you had thimbles on your fingers. Like,
yes.
How much can you protect yourself? And how much do you protect yourself?
It's okay. You're going to get poked, but you know, you'll be all right. You're going to really draw blood. But the thing with thimbles is it helps with that ache in your fingers. So I like this thimble, and I also like to show it to people. So I like it because it has the silicone grip.
Right.
So when you hold your needle, it grips, and then you have the divot so you can push and then pull. And then the palm thimble is actually very cool because it's almost like you're cupping your finger, and your fingers are just gently resting on the needle, and the palm thimble has the divots to hold it. So you're going like this. It's actually ergonomically very good.
Right.
And I've seen quilters, they go like this. They stitch with their fingers and they push like this. Right? Have you seen that?
I have, but I don't like, I'm not hand stitching much, so I wouldn't like what's more.
And then you see people using the thimble on this hand, they're stitching here and they use the thimble so they don't get poked. Like embroiderers, I see using that. So
right.
At this point, when I teach a class, I have a whole bunch of thimbles, and I show people how to use them. There's also knuckle thimbles. This is actually a finger cuff that one of my students made. Isn't it cool? But there's thimbles where you push with your knuckle.
Right.
So there's
I saw all kinds of tools. When you're teaching classes, it's usually like a small patch, and then you do a lot of different things with those patches. Like you do little bags that you fill with some good smelling things and all different things.
Yes.
Do you have an ambition to create like a huge masterpiece one day where it's going to cover like the whole wall or something?
No, because for me, I mean, then that said, I've started this big sampler, but just because I was like, I have enough little patches. I have like a whole, I'm connected. I have a whole stack. Like I have stacks of my patches. So for me, it's rather than, I just have all my little scraps that I incorporate, or I patch, or like make into bags, or I've started making belt bags just to give as gifts. So No, because for me, I want to keep it as like a functional practice. And I mean, I went to art school and I married my art school boyfriend. And, you know, we have an art school daughter and we have our son, and we got a lot of stuff on the walls in this house. So I don't, I just want to, yeah, I just like to keep it as like functional objects. Who knows, maybe one day I'll make this big thing. I mean, this might be a tablecloth.
Right.
Functional.
When you think about like where you're going these days, do you have some sort of plan? Like, are you trying to turn it into a teaching career, into writing a book at some point, into creating like a full-blown business of creating all those little things that you're gonna sell? Like, what's your vision for it?
How dare you ask me if I have a plan? You know, I love the teaching. I love the teaching because I'm spreading the Sashiko love, and I feel like it's a really good calming practice, and it's very purposeful, and you're teaching people to mend, and you're teaching people to use their hands, and you know, and they inspire me, the people I teach, because then they have other ideas of where they want to go. You know, I went on a retreat where Emma Freeman was making little body art books, and people came after her class and were like, oh, I'm going to use these in my little books. But I don't really, you know, I went to art school and then I said, oh, I don't want to, you know, I had a bunch of crappy office jobs. So I went back to school to be a teacher. So I've always been creative. I've always stitched and made little clothes and little dollhouse furnishings and curtains. So for me, this is enough where I am right now. I would love to, you know, travel and teach. But it's enough that, you know, I'm, you know, rescuing fabrics and turning them into something else to give as gifts, because I don't want to get into production of making stuff, because it's just putting more stuff out there.
Well,
So that's
when we talked before we started the interview, I sort of mentioned to you that I was trying to approach another Sashiko artist, and he was like very strongly opposed to that because he said, you know, all the Western people who try to do it, it's cultural appropriation. When I talked to you, right, like you mentioned that embroidery and mending, it's sort of like spread across the world. Do you think it's like it should belong to one nation? Do you think there is a element of like us Westerners appropriating something that was created there hundreds of years ago and like grew there? Or do you think like it just evolves naturally because the world becomes more global?
I think it's very important to know the backstory of what you're teaching. And I can empathize with a Sashiko artist feeling like this Jewish white lady is I don't want to take something that's not mine. And, you know, you know, I appreciate Sashiko. I feel I identify with it. It speaks to me on a lot of different levels, and I can, you know, I don't know if it's watering it down or appropriating it, but I feel connected to it in that as a Jew, we weren't allowed to have certain, in old-timey Europe, we weren't allowed to have certain jobs. We couldn't be tailors and create wardrobes. All we could do was make accessories. We didn't belong to guilds in Europe because of anti-Semitism, but we could make hats and gloves and belts. So, and the Sashiko started from very humble beginnings. You were not allowed to wear certain colors. You had to, they were poor people and they bought secondhand cotton to reuse, which connects to me as a Jew, buying secondhand clothes and reselling it because you couldn't buy new clothes. You couldn't own a shop, so it just connects to me. The stories just meld together, which if that's appropriating something, I get it. It just, it's tricky because I don't want to hurt anyone, and I don't want to take something from someone that's theirs, and I don't want to get in anyone's way,
Well, by the same token, when I'm thinking about, because I run into this thing in everything, right? It's not just this specific example. Like there is an example of like Latvian lace. They have certain elements, or Estonian lace, right?
Mm-hmm.
They have certain elements, right? They have noops. So anybody can knit noops. Does that make it Estonian lace, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it have to be created with the yarn created in Estonia by Estonian in Estonia? So it's like all these little things, right? But today, like the world became so global,
right?
When you concentrate on the purity of craft, it often disappears. Like we have so many endangered crafts nowadays, like Shetland lace is on the list of endangered crafts, right? It's almost so I feel like there is a way to, like, you can still preserve the purity of the craft by teaching the history of it, by teaching the traditional way of it. Or you can like insist that only people from that area is going to be able to teach, and then the craft slowly disappears.
Right. So that's finding a balance. There's a woman that was on a different retreat I went to called Sacred Maker Soul Retreat. Lisa Huon's Cultured Expressions. It's a African fabric store, and she talked about appropriation versus appreciation. So it's just, everyone's, and she's African American, and she said there's, white people can wear these fabrics, but like don't be costumey about it, and honor the tradition and the backstory. So I don't know what the answer is. I just know that I don't know everything. I am studying. I have a bunch of books. I don't know Japanese, but I look at the pictures in the Japanese books. I get translations. I try and understand and honor and continue learning so that I honor the practice. So
well, you mentioned the mindful approach to it. How much time do you spend daily stitching? Like, are you mindful about your
routine? So, well, you knit. So I try, in the mornings I'll draw stuff out because I'm awake and I can kind of concentrate on, laying out a grid or, mending something and kind of mindfully being aware of what I'm going to do. And then, nighttime is TV time. Woohoo. So, I don't, just so, I call him my boyfriend, but we've been married since 1989. He sits over there and does games on his, I don't even know where to watch TV, but so we do that. I stitch probably, some days I don't stitch and I can't believe it. So I probably stitch, between 15 minutes and an hour and a half every day.
Well, is there like a favorite part of that and least favorite part of that?
The most challenging part used to be for me was drawing the grid, because when you're stitching something, your hands rub on it. And then if you're using something like a water soluble pencil, it rubs off, which is both good and bad. So I did a lot of experimenting. I tried watercolor pencils, which stay on but are hard to wash off. I tried Pilot friction pens, which I'm digging around in this bag, which iron off. So, but the thing I found, which may not be ergonomically correct, are water soluble markers, because they stay on. But if you're dealing, and then you can spritz them off, and they don't rub off. Don't get air soluble. That's for the embroiderers. And then I really like, I get these heat erasable gel pens, and I'm looking for one. Of course, I don't have a white one, but I get these heat erasable gel pens in white, which are really good on the denim, and then you iron them off. But some people will not use them because they never actually leave your clothes. You iron them off, and then when you go in the cold, the grid comes back, but then you iron them off. So some people will not use those. And if I have a small project, I will use the pencils, because it's quick. And if once I lay down the first set of stitches, I have my base, and it doesn't matter as much if I have a grid the whole time. So yes, it was a process.
What's your fabric stash and thread stash looks like nowadays?
Okay, it's better than it used to be, because I used to sew a lot of clothes. I mean, and I would like find one pattern, some McCall's Simplicity pattern that I really, really liked. And I would crank out like literally 20 dresses, like over a period of years. And I did an experiment where I said, I'm not going to wash any of my dresses. And I didn't have to do any laundry for like 3 weeks. So I used to collect a lot of, big box store fabric. I don't do that anymore. I buy from independent shops. I like Beetle and Fred. I like the Quilt Tree in New York. I like to buy from Fab Scrap, which is a reuse warehouse in Brooklyn. It's brand new clothes from designers and thrift stores and little vintagey shops. So it's not, now it's more like, can I use this fabric to make a scarf? Can I use this fabric to patch? Can I use this fabric to make a cow patch boxy tunic top that then I can stitch? So it's much better.
Do you have some favorite item that you created that you would never part with?
Oh, my little jean jacket. I love my jean jacket. I love my little bags. Let's see, I love these little bags.
Oh, that's so pretty.
And then my yarn situation, my thread situation. I mean, ideally they're all beautifully braided. So, and the thread's not so bad. Like once you stop cranking out a bunch of clothes and you just make patches and mend your clothes, I do have a little guilty pleasure for vintage patchwork quilts, and that's a whole other situation that I like to cut up and make into pants or tops. The quilting people might not like that, but it's not hiding in a basement. I'm wearing it. So, I mean, right now my fabric I'm looking at it. It's got 1, 2, I got 4 shelves, which is not bad. And they're very messy. That's not bad. And then I have a lot of naturally dyed stuff.
Well, you mentioned that your family is very artistic. Are they very supportive of you going into that field?
Hey, everyone's very tolerant around here. My husband and I used to live in like a teeny tiny 1-bedroom apartment, and he would do woodworking in his parents' garage, and I had all my fabric and my sewing machines like covering, one wall. So, and I love it now that I'm a grown-up, because now I can do natural dyeing in the kitchen, and my mom doesn't tell me to clean up after myself and to get out of the way because I'm the mom. So, yeah. So
how do you think it changed your life socially?
I have met a lot of people that are so interesting, and they come from far away, and they have, all these wonderful stories of how they've come to the workshop table, and and they're people are web designers, they're working in HR, they're teachers, they're librarians, they're biologists. I just the interaction with all the people has been very, really invigorating. I mean, I'm an extrovert, but I need to recharge my batteries. So I'm like really excited to be with everyone. And then the next after teaching, I need like 2 days, like, but I love it. And it's changed my life, the stitching, because I always have something in my hands. And who's not anxious, but it's really helped with my anxiety just to know that I always have something in my hands to do, so that I'm like grounded. I'm like right here, right now. Of course, you think about other things, but you're also focused and your hands are busy. And it just does something to my brain. It like flips the switch.
Right. Like, is it always a conversation starter when you're outside with your little patch, like at the dentist office or something, waiting?
Oh, yeah. The dentist, they're used to me. They've been going there forever, and they're like, look what Rachel's wearing today. But it is I live in Connecticut, and Connecticut people are very careful and kind of introverts. I get that's all I'm going to say, because I grew up in Southern California, where people are very nice. They might not want to be your friend, but they're very nice. But yes, if I'm stitching in the Starbucks, or I'm stitching out in public, people in Connecticut, they'll go like this. They won't say anything. But if Mike and I are in the city and I'm sitting and he's writing and I'm stitching, people will definitely come up and chat with me or say something.
Well, how many people know about exactly what you're doing? Like, do people come to you and ask if you're mending, embroidering, or is it Sashiko? Like, do people know what you're doing?
No, they not necessarily, but they always have a story about their mother, their grandmother mended their clothes. Their mother, grandmother, auntie, made their clothes for them and stitched. So they always have like a little stitching story to tell. Right. So they always I get to hear stories that other people have. So that's part of my, memory collection. I got their stories in there.
Well, is that your favorite part about teaching as well, meeting all these different people with their stories?
Yes, that's one of my favorite parts. The other favorite part is getting someone, an adult, with hand sewing trauma, and them feeling frustrated, not understanding, asking a lot of questions, being unsure about what's next. And then next thing, they're completely silent and the whole table's quiet and everyone's just stitching. And like, I have to stop myself from saying anything because nobody realizes that it's quiet. But they're all just, that is like the magical moment that they all got it. And that, now they're all doing it, and now they can all go home and do it on their own, and they have instructions, and they can, that part, that teacher part is the favorite part, just to watch everyone.
That's your proud moment.
Yes, it's very magical.
I mean, do you think there are people who just can't learn that? Or is that
no
for everybody?
No. I have a student, Gwen. She came to all of my classes when we were at a craft center, and she came to every single craft center. We're all wearing our masks. We're all far away. We have the windows open. It's like 30 degrees outside. She came to every single class, and she said, I don't understand, Rachel. Why do you always talk about crying when you were learning? She said, I'm here to learn, and it's going to take me 100 times, but I'm going to keep coming back. So there's no one that can't do it. It's just practice. It's just practice. And maybe you won't do it the way I show you, and maybe you'll do it the way that's comfortable for you, but everyone can do it.
Well, when you think about your journey,
Yes.
where do you think you are? Like how much you still have to learn about it?
Oh, I have so much to do. I'm 59 years old, and I feel like when I have the same feeling now that I had when I was in college, where the world was so wide open, and there, like, you would go to the library and there'd be all these books, and or you go to a museum or an art gallery and there'd be all this stuff. I feel like it's unending. It's never ending. So I have some things to do. I need to go to Japan. I need to learn Japanese. I need to go continue learning with a variety of different people. I've taken classes online with Tatter Library in Brooklyn. I take classes online with Sashiko Lab, Kazui. I've took classes in person with Jessica. I've taken classes in class with Cowpatch that was like embroidery. So you have like your reference. If I'm forgetting you, I'm sorry. Whoever I've taken classes with. I even taken classes like on improv patchwork at Hartford Stitch, and even taking classes on English paper piecing. Like every class you take just informs you. So I'm forever learning.
Well, I hope I can take class with you one day at some point.
Where are you?
Right. I'm in Massachusetts, so not that far.
Oh, okay. We got to find a little shop for me to come to.
We'll work on that.
Yes.
I want to thank you for being my guest today. I really enjoyed talking to you and getting to know you.
Thank you, Irina. You asked some really good questions I didn't know the answer to. So I didn't know they were questions that need to be asked.
That's
I'm excited.
My favorite part when, we get to think about something new about what we already know.
I'm very honored and flattered, and it been wonderful to chat with you.
Thank you.